Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for the Q&A session. First one of May. Well, it's the May Q&A, isn't it? So that makes sense, right? But it's part one.
Yep.
Part one of the May Q&A. A lot of great questions to get through because we do have Computex coming up next week. So there's a few rumors and things like that, which Tim always loves addressing the rumors. So we'll get into it. But before we do, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their CryoSheet graphene thermal pads, which are an excellent alternative to thermal pastes. They offer very high thermal conductivity with no liquid components, so they can't dry out and therefore don't degrade over time like pastes and even liquid metals. CryoSheet is very easy to use, it's extremely durable and is available in a range of sizes to suit most applications. I've personally done some high-end GPU testing with CryoSheet and the results were impressive, very similar in fact to that of liquid metal, but without the mess and of course no risk of drying out. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. All right, Tim, first question here. RDNA 4 is rumored, and I'll give this one to you. I know you love your rumors.
Sure.
Starting with them straight. Computex next week.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
This. So RDNA 4 is rumored to not increase performance versus RDNA 3. So what's your ideal RDNA 4 release? And I think there was a fair bit more to this question that you've just trimmed off so we can get straight into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still struggling to come to terms with RDNA 3. I haven't even thought about RDNA 4. I'm not up to speed at all with the rumors, so apologies, but hopefully Tim has something to say.
Well,
no pressure.
Supposedly the rumors are saying there's not going to be any high-end RDNA 4 products, which personally I think is a huge mistake on AMD's part. I can't remember who was talking about this recently. I don't think it was us. Mm-hmm. Someone else was talking about how consistent NVIDIA's lineup always is year to year. You know you're getting high-end products, you know there's going to be mid-range products, and then they'll probably do something not ideal for the mainstream buyers, but probably something around those sort of price points. Whereas AMD, year on year, they kind of just do whatever they feel like. One year you're getting high-end products, the next year there's no high-end products. Sometimes there'll be 10 graphics cards across the whole lineup. Other years there'll only be 5 or 6 GPUs. And I think that hurts sort of their consistency, so that if you're buying into the Radeon ecosystem, you don't really know year to year what's going to be available for you. Like you might buy a high-end product one year and then you want to upgrade a few years later and there's nothing for you, which kind of forces you into switching away from the Radeon ecosystem if you wanted to continue to buy high-end products. So firstly, I think that that's a pretty significant mistake. Obviously, I don't know what sort of products they could have made in the high end. They might not have had anything suitable available. But yeah, that's going to be a big mistake. But I think if they're sticking to existing performance tiers, so they're sort of having to deal with things that we've already released onto the market, they've got to stop following NVIDIA. Mm-hmm. They are huge followers at the moment in terms of looking at NVIDIA and just going, let's cut a little bit off. Take a little bit off the price. That's our product. That's if you're re-releasing effectively the same performance tiers, that's not going to cut it. You've got to do better than that. You've got to be releasing products that are significantly better value and really draw people in from the value standpoint. If you're focusing on the mid-range, make the mid-range cards unbeatable value. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're looking at the previous lineup of RDNA 3 and you're going, okay, let's take off a small amount from each product. Let's look at what NVIDIA's doing, make it 10% cheaper. Don't do that. It's not going to work. It's going to have to be, I don't know, something that you look at on the shelf and go, I can't pass that up because they've taken what used to be an $800 GPU is now $400 or something like that. Yep.
Yeah, I think fewer X's as well for the next generation would be the way to handle that.
Yeah, a lot of naming issues.
We don't need an XTX, XT type thing. Obviously, some of the previous product launches have been due to architectural limitations, either through scaling poorly or excessive power consumption, or just not being able to release a product at the high end that would be competitive, even with these increased prices. They still wouldn't be able to make a competitive product there. And if, again, I'm unaware of the rumors, what's meant to be happening here, but if they're not able to make an efficiency / performance step forward with RDNA 4 over RDNA 3, then that would sort of explain why they've abandoned the high end, because it's unachievable. Because surely NVIDIA is going to make based on their releases and how they've gone over the years, I expect the GeForce 50 series to be a fairly significant leap forward in terms of performance. And if that's the case, they just can't live with that. They can't go with it. So that leaves them with a Radeon RX 5000 situation where they've got, a 5700 XT that's a pretty good product, good value, but nothing to combat something like a 2080 Ti. So
I think it depends, like, are they going to... Obviously, if they get no performance or efficiency gains and they can't match, let's say, 5090, for example, then that's obviously a problem that maybe you have to sell with a 80 tier, 70 Ti sort of tier. But if the rumors are suggesting that they're not even attempting that, they're just cutting those products out completely, so not even bothering to make a super high tier product. Again, maybe that's because they don't see that card selling super well. I mean, I don't know, does that bode well for the rest of the lineup if they're not seeing significant gains to even justify creating like an 80 class competitor?
Well, they made a 7900 XTX. If they're only getting 10% more than that, then that's the limit of what they can do. Are they going to do like a gigantic, huge GPU that still doesn't really match the performance of the high NVIDIA stuff, but uses ungodly amounts of power? I'm not sure. I mean, this is all rumors and yet to be seen. Hopefully, it's more competitive, but well, we'll wait and see. All right, Tim, another Computex related thing, though I'm not sure how Computex related this one is despite many of the rumors. But anyway, what are you expecting from the upcoming RTX 5090?
I don't think that's going to be shown at Computex.
Well, we can talk about that in a minute. Rumors say that it will support GDDR7 using a 512-bit wide memory bus, so it might be a 32GB product. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I've also heard that it will include 3 PCBs. How is that even a thing? Yeah, I mean, I suppose good question there. We have seen some leaked cooler pictures come up over the years, and some of them were alleged, like they were going to do I heard at one point they were going to do an RTX 4090 Ti type product, and that's where these crazy big coolers were coming from, 600 watt plus GPUs.
Yep.
I think they were alleged to be 4-slot cards, and they could possibly be the 5090. That's what the Founders Edition could be. And I
doubt it.
Well,
if AMD's not making high-end products, I don't think they'll have the incentive to go 600 watts or something that would need a 4-slot cooler.
But what if they can sell it for a lot more than they currently are?
I still think they'd limit what's the difference between a 450 watt and a 600 watt, GPU in terms of performance? You probably get 10% more performance. Well, I can't imagine they'll do that, but we'll see.
I'm dreaming here, thinking of this ridiculous product and how ridiculous and dumb it would be. I can't wait. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you do go that huge, traditional layouts and designs probably don't work that well, and we've seen that NVIDIA likes to get creative with their PCB shapes, layouts, and designs. So it could, I guess they could. I think the rumors sort of hint at this as well. Stuff like the way the PCIe slot connects to it through almost a riser, that could be separate. The actual connecting to that. And we've seen motherboard manufacturers starting to get creative with those designs, power and stuff through the motherboard.
Yeah.
So it could be that one of them is your interface. One of the PCBs is the interface PCB. Then you've obviously got the main board. It's almost like a system in itself. And then maybe I/O. Because of the way that a 4-slot card might be oriented. So that
PCB could be tiny.
That's right.
Not 3 layers of huge PCBs. It'd be like a small one for the PCI interface, the main one where you've got your memory, power delivery, GPU, and then another small one for I/O. Yeah. Potentially. That's just a guess.
That's right. And with a lot of memory as well, depending on how that's configured around the GPU, whether it's both sides of the PCB or there'll be special designs that do that, then having a sort of a sandwiched type cooler that can extract heat from both sides of the PCB would be hugely beneficial there, because we saw how problematic that was with RTX 3090 Ti's, that sort of stuff. So again, this is all speculation and leak stuff. So,
who knows?
We have no idea. But the rumors do suggest 16 memory chips for the 32GB model, which would make sense if they're 2GB density chips for GDDR7, which seems to be the case. What else? What was the question? I guess the other part of the question you asked is when... Well,
what are we expecting?
This is all coming up because of Computex, right?
Right.
I've heard endless rumors that for some reason this stuff's going to get teased or announced at Computex. Teased, as I suppose, a possibility. Has NVIDIA ever teased upcoming GPUs? I think
Computex has not been for the last few years a big NVIDIA show.
they just talk about existing products and features and stuff, don't they?
So NVIDIA isn't really at Computex this year. You know, they're having some sort of keynote or event before Computex, but it's not officially linked to Computex. I know people would claim that it is part of Computex, but there is kind of a distinction between, you know, AMD and Intel, for example, both have keynotes as part of the official Computex program. NVIDIA's is separate, and as far as we're aware, they don't have any sort of booth presence at the show either. I think they will be there for other reasons, but yeah, so Computex has not historically been the big NVIDIA announcement show, especially for GPUs. I think they like to keep things to themselves, their own spotlight, their own limelight. The past couple of launches, they've had sort of an individual event where they've it's been sort of closer to the launch of products, because you know, I don't expect a 5090 to be released in, say, July, for example, which would make sense for a Computex announcement. But if they announce now and release in November, that's a big gap. So I don't think NVIDIA is big into teasing or into, just announcements of Computex. I don't expect that to happen, but I don't know for sure, obviously, but just based on our planning for Computex, you know, those sort of things, it seems unlikely.
Yeah, I expect we might see some like interesting partners with some like, here's some concept cooling that could be used for...
Right, yeah, those will definitely be 5090 coolers.
Well, they'll also be, even if they're not, they'll be doing that to generate hype and get exposure and whatnot.
Sure,
so they could definitely not be 5090 coolers. They're just
they definitely will be though.
Okay.
They'll say they're not, but then use them.
No, I agree with all that. I think if we are going to see them this year, there'll be a Q4 release because that just makes sense. And NVIDIA will do their own announcement, their own event, let's say. So, and I also expect probably like what we've seen for the last few launches, you'll get like the 5080 will be announced alongside the 5090, and one of them will be launched first and the other one will come a week or two later. Expect that to happen, and then we'll get the 5070 like January or something like that would be my guess.
Yeah. I think another thing as well that leads me more towards thinking that's the plan is I remember with the 40 series, there was quite a lot of hype from NVIDIA in the lead up to that event that they were announcing the products. Little teasers, little things that you'd see, social media things being like, hey, you know, the next generation of gaming is coming or something along those lines, really to get people hyped up to watch the stream. And NVIDIA's event is, like a week away?
It's a week, yeah.
And there's been little to no fanfare. So, I just don't... They're so focused on AI at the moment, and that's going to be... You know, we're hearing a lot of, like, the announcements, right, where they're like, hey, we're Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, whoever, you know, this is their event that they're having at Computex, and it's like, could you put more AI labels on your little announcement thing? Like... making AI, come to our AI event for AI PCs where we launch the future of AI, just put that another 5 times somewhere in there. So I imagine NVIDIA's event with all their announcements so far will be largely around that at Computex. But like launching the 5090 and 5080 first makes the most sense to me. And I imagine pricing will be pretty high as well to really capitalize on early adopters. I mean, a 32 gig GPU, they're not going to make that cheap. So
no, they're very exciting products. Likely going to be seen later in the year, but performance, pricing, all that stuff. It's stuff we'll find out later in the year. Yeah,
the big thing for me is whether we see AMD launch RDNA 4 first, or whether NVIDIA will launch the GeForce 50 series first. Because it seems more like people have been indicating for a while that RDNA 4 would be coming first. At least that's what rumors have been suggesting. But it'd be very un-NVIDIA-like to let AMD go first. They are very... At least for the last few generations, they have almost always gotten in ahead. So I'd be surprised if RDNA 4 comes first just based on that. But apparently, when we heard rumors a year ago, they were suggesting the total opposite. So,
well, in a week we get to find out if this section of the Q&A aged like milk or not.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Hopefully it did, because that'd be really exciting.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on. All right, next one, Tim. How much do you think Intel's CPU issues will damage their brand? will it be the last straw for them? It's not going to be the last straw, that's for sure.
No.
And yeah, I don't know, it's a weird, confusing situation that I think Intel themselves are still trying to navigate and work out exactly what to do. I haven't made a follow-up video on this because it's a developing story. Every time I test a BIOS, I contact the manufacturer, ask them a few questions. They say, well, actually, we have a new BIOS coming out shortly. It's going to change that behavior. It's going to change the way things are done. We're changing to these settings, these power limits. So I still don't know how to comment on it too much. Obviously, it's not good for their reputation, having a lot of... Well, it's customers that are having the problem, right? You don't want to have a heap of your customers who are buying your flagship product suffering from stability issues. And there'll be people that are saying it's one workload, it's this, it's that. Well, I mean, we're hearing from a lot of Core i9 users, and we're seeing a lot of Core i9 users at places like Reddit and stuff complaining about instability, whether it's an inherent problem with the CPU or just a misconfigured motherboard. Hard to say, but you're not seeing these reports from 7800X 3D owners and Ryzen 9 owners and stuff like that. So it is a problem. How much of a problem, though, it's still a bit hard to say, and how they actually go about addressing the problem and what that means for those owners is still unbelievably too early to say. So it's a mess.
Yeah. I mean, being the last straw and it being, significantly hurting their brand, I think the general releases that they put out into the market have already caused quite a few problems for them without even factoring in the latest stability issue things. Like, they're just not selling CPUs. People just aren't interested in them from a number of factors, whether that's the platform, the power consumption, the performance. They used to be in a pretty clear leadership position, especially for gaming. Like, you could reliably buy the Intel Core i9 part, get the best gaming performance. That's really no longer the case. So those factors are things that I think people more generally gravitate towards and causes sales issues. I think this is just kind of a compounding thing. It's almost, I find it very closely related to the power situation. Like, if you're someone that was already worrying about the power consumption of an Intel part, hearing about the stability issues, it's not... The damage to the brand was already done by having it consume so much power.
Yeah, that can be a major problem. As far as stability and all that stuff goes, it's a tough one. For example, AM5 didn't suffer too much, I don't think, in terms of desirability from the stability and massive reliability problems I had with some of the X3D CPUs burning up in the socket, which was a problem that's been long addressed now, but it was a problem. How widespread and how many people affected to this day, it's still quite hard to say. But having your CPU, essentially burn up in the socket is not a good situation, but AM5 sales have been really strong and continued to be strong, whereas LJ1700 not so much. And the real reasons for that are stuff like you've talked about, the excessive power usage. But I think more than that is the fact that you've got, it doesn't really matter if you're an AMD fan or an Intel fan, it really doesn't matter which way you slice it. At the high end, or even from the high end all the way down, AMD and Intel are very competitive, whether it's productivity or gaming. They're very competitive, at least in outright performance. Yeah, there's efficiency concerns on the Intel side and stuff like that, but they're very similar in terms of performance, yet at least at retail, so I'm not talking server market, I'm not talking mobile market, I'm talking more do-it-yourself enthusiast market. So if you speak to any of the local retailers, AMD is heavily outselling Intel. And so efficiency, big part of that reason. I think another reason which we talk about time and time again, and people deny it, but I think hard to deny at this point, is stuff like platform longevity. AM4 proved that can work. AM5 is hopefully going to do that again. You have a better upgrade path than obviously what LJ1700 does. Now that's a dead platform and will be replaced probably later this year. So there are other issues there that I think is probably hurting, at least, I don't know if it's hurting the brand as much as it's just their sales at the moment. Because, Intel's still quite a strong brand and they do make good products and they have made great products over the years. But yeah, the power thing's a mess. It's a mess. All right, Tim. Serious question I'm going to put to you here.
All right.
Get ready. Is AMD lacking innovation in general? Just generally.
Right.
Are they relying too much on Ryzen to keep up?
I think the last part of that question is definitely yes.
Okay.
Because, that's mostly that's their most successful product at the moment, is making most of their sales. And I guess I'm sort of also including Epic server CPUs in that discussion. So it's
Definitely.
not specifically Ryzen, but their CPU division is obviously
Zen.
the main part of the company that's doing well at the moment. Are they lacking innovation? I think on the CPU side, probably not. I think they've been doing a pretty good job of keeping up pace there, introducing interesting new features, whether that's 3D V-cache for gaming or the chiplet design.
Not just for gaming. I just want to.
Well, yeah, there are some server applications to that as well. But their chiplet design for server CPUs has been highly successful, and they were sort of first to do that for that type of product. So I think those aspects of innovation have certainly been, keeping them really at the forefront of the CPU market and producing compelling products. And that's, there's obviously a whole bunch of other stuff. We've talked at length in the Q&A about platform longevity. Obviously, that's an innovative feature that they introduced a while back now.
So they're not lacking, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, no. I think
it's more specific.
Yeah, I think I'm not all up on the whole AI market thing, because that's more of a server and data center thing than it is for consumer products at the moment. Now, some people probably get angry about that in the comments, saying this is huge for consumers somehow. Don't know. We'll stick to gaming
calm
for
down,
now.
you AI buff.
But obviously, Nvidia has completely destroyed them in terms of the AI market. So whether or not we're a bit too slow for AI is probably something you could ask people that are more familiar with the AI market on that. But I think the main thing that they're lacking innovation is something that we've been talking about probably in this Q&A and other things is their Radeon division. I mean, the Radeon division is lacking innovation, I would say. The products have been pretty... Again, I used this word earlier. I think the Radeon division, they're being followers. Like, they're seeing what NVIDIA's doing, and they make not as good of a product, and they try and price it sort of similar to NVIDIA, but a little less, and that's that. There's not... I don't really get overly excited about new... Like, what's the latest Radeon feature that you'd go, wow, I've got to have that in my GPU. Like, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. Of course, I'm sure people in the comments will be like, well, what about driver side frame generation or something like that? Those features don't do it for me. No, so
they're not great.
I'm
having decent hardware, typically in the past they've given extra VRAM, which can be of benefit. Really all they need to do to innovate there is be super duper competitive on pricing and make it hard to pass on their products, which is what you've spoke about the problem.
Yeah, that's something like partial innovation.
Well, it's not innovation as such. It's just
like the chiplet design. You could sort of say that was innovative, but it didn't really lead to genuine benefits for consumers. Like, it didn't make AMD's parts particularly cheap. Like, the theory was you'd make them in chiplets and then that would lower the cost of the silicon because they get better yields, improves the cost for consumers. That didn't really pan out. Like, the products weren't especially great value. So it was an innovative design. It was interesting to see them do it. But from that perspective, innovation you'd hope would have benefits for consumers in some way. So yeah, like we've talked a lot about, their lack of coming up with features that really sell you on products. And like I said, I just think they're too much in this follower mindset. I can even sort of see, like, hasn't there been rumors lately, and this is not related to Radeon division, of them changing the name of their Ryzen products to have like AI in the name or something? And
I have heard that. That's awful.
Making the naming scheme very similar to Intel CPUs, which is, again, feels very like they're not even a follower in the CPU market. They're kind of in a leadership position. And yet they're just copying...
The chipset names and stuff are
Intel,
terrible. There's some... Yeah.
It's just weird. It's just weird thinking. So I'd like to see probably a bit more... Yeah, if you're in a position where you are leading in the market, go your own path. Do what NVIDIA's done and sort of, keep putting the foot on the throttle as much as you possibly can and doing things in a way that establishes you as a leader in that space, which I think for CPUs they're heading closer and closer towards. But yeah, for Radeon, like, just... Yeah, making a product that's similar to an NVIDIA GPU but not quite as good and not quite as expensive just doesn't really do much for me. It's they've got to improve that, I think. So yeah.
All right, Tim. This one's this one. Did you see this question?
Yeah.
This one is straight fire. Steve, would you say that anyone that bought a 14900 KS to blame for their own issues. I don't even know how to answer this one. What do you even mean? I mean, the 14900 KS, the KS CPUs, they obviously don't make sense. They're sort of dumb products, but if you're into overclocking and tinkering with your PC to extract every last frame, and that's exciting to you and worthwhile, then I guess like it's hard to say that you shouldn't overclock or you shouldn't do this because it's dumb and it doesn't make sense. But if you're doing it for fun and you enjoy doing that, then yeah, that's fine. And as for, I mean, how many people who have bought a 14900 KS and are really into tuning and overclocking and are actually having these problems, like that are fully customizing everything in the name of extracting as much performance as possible while I suppose maintaining some sort of stability? I don't think 14900 KS owners who bought that CPU for the reasons that you should buy that CPU care.
Yeah.
So
I mean, CPUs we've seen reports of some CPUs not being stable at stock. So I guess if they're not, if there's 14900 cases that are not stable at stock, then they're going to have more issues with overclock, and that's not really the user's fault in that sense. Obviously, there can be stability issues when you overclock, but if having issues when they're saying that that's a configuration you should be able to run it at, then hard to blame the user for that, I think.
Yeah, you can't blame the user for that. And I mean, people are entitled and welcome to purchase whatever components they want. And we know that the Core i9 range, as we've said, power consumption aside, because that's not really relevant in this discussion, they are blistering fast products. Their performance is mighty impressive. And if you're getting those CPUs to get even more out of them, and again, that's what you enjoy doing, then there's nothing wrong with that. They certainly shouldn't be blamed for that. Overclocking and that can be a lot of fun. This is an interesting one that's been doing the rounds because of a pictured MSI board. And we will be going to the MSI booth first thing, so perhaps we will come across it. But the question is, do you think the new CAM2 standard for RAM will take off and will replace DDR for the PC market in a couple of years? So compression attached memory modules, do you think they're going to be all the rage over the next few years? If I had to guess, would say nope. I don't think it's going to happen.
Phew, you weren't asking me because I don't really know.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, I expect that the DIMM slots that we currently have will continue to be the main standard. But yeah, there are some benefits to the CAM configuration. It's obviously more compact. You get higher densities, can be easier to cool. So yeah, possibly, but on the desktop, I don't think so. It probably makes more sense for mobile type products, and the benefits probably just aren't there, and memory compatibility and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, some people, again, I haven't actually checked this fact, so maybe I shouldn't be saying in a Q&A, but some people were saying in our Discord chat when they were discussing the CAM memory that theoretically, because of the layout and the advantages of having it in a sort of single package, that you could get much higher capacities at higher frequencies and better timings. So, of course, usually when you have got your DIMM slots and you're trying to populate 4 DIMMs, you're having to reduce that memory speed quite a bit to get it to work, whereas theoretically with CAM, you'll be able to run it more like a single or dual stick frequency with much more capacity available to you. Don't know whether that's actually going to be the case with those motherboards, but it would be nice to get things like 128, 256 gigabytes of memory with not just DDR5 like 3600 or 4400 speeds or whatever the general speeds you can get on like an AM5 platform, for example. Although I think that CAM motherboard is an Intel board, isn't it? The leaked images. But anyway,
I think it would be better. I think there are a lot of benefits to it. I think the current interface we've had for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's just been iterated on. It's like basically the same thing, but it's pretty old now.
I think this, I don't know what you'd call it. It's not really a more modular approach, is it? It's because they're both...
It's a more modern approach.
It's a more modern approach.
They've looked at the flaws and were like, well, if we're going to make a new standard, let's actually think about this. What are the benefits?
I would like to see it become a new standard. I'm just not sure that it will. But
it could be, and again, even if it does become a standard, it's like when is it the universally used standard? Like it can become a standard, but then not get used fully for 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah, that's right.
So-
So it'd most likely come in more mainstream with a platform upgrade, like what we were talking about earlier, like an AM6 type platform thing or a future Intel platform. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Why bother to upgrade a GPU when they are overpriced? Guess it depends if you need one though. And AAA is in decline. Okay. Graphics getting worse. Ray tracing seems to have gone nowhere. Not entirely fair, I don't think. I mean,
I think graphics getting worse is pretty harsh. I think the pace at which graphics has been getting better isn't as fast as it was a decade ago.
Sure.
So, a lot of people like to say, like, you see a new AAA game announced, so people are like, man, the graphics in this are unimpressive. We had graphics like this 10 years ago. Then you go back and you look at the game from 10 years ago, and it looks like absolute trash compared to current games. Because you kind of, I think about a game like The Witcher. When I played that, I was like, whoa, this game looks incredible. The visuals are amazing. And that informs your opinion. And then you play games in the future and you're like, whoa, that looks amazing. You always think like, oh, I remember playing The Witcher and it looked really good. Then you compare the two and you're like, yeah, it was just my perception that that's what the graphics were. Comparatively to modern stuff, it doesn't really hold up that well, which is, again, that's just innovation. So yeah, I partially agree, partially disagree with parts of the question. Ray tracing, there are some good ray tracing games that look great. But I mean, this is one of the cycles that I think GPU manufacturers have had a role in sort of getting to this point where we're seeing less innovation in graphics and less pushing the edge of things. And that's because you can't buy, and haven't been able to for a while, good mainstream GPU upgrades. It's been a neglected category as they focus on the high end. And that creates this whole vicious cycle. There's less mainstream GPUs that people are buying, so people don't buy as many of them. So game developers then look at the target market of what can they do with their games, because they need to figure out the min spec, what people can do. And there hasn't been as much advancement in that tier, so they don't introduce as many cool new graphical features. They don't try and push the boundaries as much, and that leads to lower GPU sales because people don't want to upgrade anymore. So it's kind of this, everyone plays a part in that ecosystem. If GPU manufacturers had produced much more powerful mid-range and mainstream GPUs that really incentivize upgrades, then game developers will look and go, hey, the min spec that we're dealing with now is so much higher that we can now justify much more ray tracing in games, path tracing. We can go crazy on all sorts of new graphical features, more textures if there was more VRAM, for example. So yeah, it's kind of, they go one in the other, I think. And I feel like as we try and push more and more into, NVIDIA's trying to incentivize ray tracing, for example, that will not happen to the degree they want it to happen until the mid-range mainstream GPUs are much more capable than they are today. So I'm sure that's, of course, AAA game development is now taking a lot longer and all those sorts of things play into it as well. But yeah, we can't just ignore the whole, why aren't you upgrading? Well, it's kind of, maybe they've all played a little bit of a role there in that one.
Okay, we'll hit pause there on the May Q&A series. Part 2 will be coming up on the channel in the next few days, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. But other than that, we are pretty much done for this one. You enjoy that?
Oh yeah, I always enjoyed the Q&A sessions, so lots of great questions as always, and
hopefully the
plenty more to come.
Enjoyed it as much as Tim. But yeah, that was very good. Thanks to everyone who asked questions, and yeah, as I said, there's still a part 2 and a part 3 to come. So if you did ask a question, there's a chance that we will address that in those parts. But only if it's a good question. I only ask good questions, guys. So, But yeah, Patreon float plane, check that out if you're interested. But if not, that's perfectly fine. And we would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.